Hello, and welcome to another episode from Season 6 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're changing things up. We're devoting a whole season to reviewing Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time. In each episode, we'll break down a different movie, talk about how scary it really was, and then update our rankings to prove how much smarter we are than the other people on the internet. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. This film, starring Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts, was filmed and released in 1999 in Japan.
What audition did you watch?
I watched the one that was the romantic comedy, but then I fell asleep about halfway through, so I'm not sure how it ended.
Same.
Yeah.
I actually always have a fear every week about us watching the wrong movie.
Yeah, like 28 days and 28 days later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I figure there's a fair chance it'll happen someday, but it'll make for an interesting podcast.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So I got to throw my hands up a little bit and wonder how we arrived at this movie this high on the list. Apparently it's been very influential to like a lot of horror writers and authors, but I don't really understand why. And looking at some of the other movies on the list that came like after this one, because the list is scariest movies of all time, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, if you look like scares per minute, this one was real concentrated in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I was super bummed out, man.
Yeah.
I was bummed out. I had high hopes for this one. I was looking forward to it all list. Yeah. And
I think maybe one thing that we're missing with it is this was made 20 years ago. And so maybe had we watched it at that time, there's like a whole 20 years of horror movie history that we wouldn't have been exposed to. And some of the ideas of it would have been a lot more like groundbreaking or revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
But watching it now, I feel like it didn't age super well.
Yeah, it definitely didn't. I totally felt like I was watching a mid-90s movie the whole time.
Yeah. Starring
I was
Hugh
with
Grant
it.
and Julia Roberts.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we can get into it for sure after the intro and facts, but it was just confusing to me. I didn't realize, like, I thought I was watching the wrong movie multiple times until like an hour and a half into it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, this is...
Yeah, there it goes. Also, the director is Takashi Miike, I think is how you would say it. But the first time I saw it, I thought it was Takashi Mike, and that made me think it was like Date Mike or Prison Mike, which made me like him more, but then I watched his movie. So
yeah. Anyway,
I'm going to go ahead and introduce it, and then you can do your facts, and then we will get into the gory details. In October of 1999, Audition premiered at the Vancouver International Film Festival. This movie was directed by Japanese filmmaker Takashi Miike and follows the story of a well-to-do widower named Aomi who partners with his friend to create an audition for the lead female role in a movie that will never be made in order to meet eligible bachelorettes. Aomi meets a charming younger woman named Asami who ends up having a very dark past. This movie made about $130,000 at the box office in the United States on a limited release. Though it did not do very well in Japan, Audition had much more success overseas. In the early 2010s, it placed number 18 on a list of top horror films as voted by horror authors, directors, actors, and critics polled by Time Out. This movie can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
Very, very true. And so what I learned about this movie was that it's really hard to search for facts about a movie called Audition. Because if you say like facts about a movie audition, it starts telling you facts of what you should do if you go to a movie audition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So long story short, I have a new role. I'm in a
congratulations.
Movie. Yeah.
Nailed the audition.
Yeah, I nailed it. I got a lot of facts about it. So I think I'm gonna say I have 2.5.
Okay. I'm excited for the half, but go on.
So, because I don't believe the half. Just for the record, there's not really a drug out there that paralyzes you and still lets you feel pain.
Yeah, that seemed a little suspect.
Yeah, they had to make it up. Understandable. They could have just tied them up, but whatever. So this movie's based on a book, and in the book, the main guy's both of his feet get cut off. However, initially in the script they didn't do it. They didn't cut feet off, and then they did just one. Straight from IMDb. This is the fact I don't believe.
Okay.
Supposedly, the female main character actually vomited in the bowl. I don't believe it.
It looked like too much like soup.
Yeah, and also the actor, like, that's one thing if, like, she's, like, a method actor, like this fact is saying.
Yeah.
But, like, the guy would also have to be a method actor and, like, willing to, like...
Yeah.
And it doesn't show her vomiting, so I don't know. I think that's suspect, but anyway.
Well, and, like, as skinny as she was, there's no way she had eaten enough to throw up enough to fill up that bowl. That's where I land on it.
That's true, man.
So, yeah. There you go.
My facts.
So normally I have my notes pretty organized in like certain things I want to talk about, but this movie I felt like was a little all over the place. So I thought it might be beneficial to break it into 3 parts and then just kind of work our way through each one. Because some I think will work through faster than others.
Oh, okay.
Part 1 is mostly just romantic comedy in which they introduce Aomi and start setting up how he meets Asami. And then part 2 is his fever dream. And then part 3 is her torturing him. So, if we start talking about part 1, it was a surprisingly lighthearted romantic movie that was also a little bit creepy because of the guy, not because of horror.
Yeah. I could see that for sure. The only creepy thing about the girl is when they cut to the scene of her, like, in the room.
Waiting for the phone call?
Waiting for the phone call.
Yeah.
That was the only thing for like an hour and a half into it that made you think, like, this is a horror.
Yes.
Horror movie.
Yeah, or that, like, there's more going on than the super straightforward story that's being told.
But there was comedy in it.
There was.
There were parts where I laughed.
Same, yeah.
I chuckled. I will say this, though, the camera work with it, I was actually kind of impressed with. I'm not one for romantic comedies, surprisingly.
I don't believe that for a minute, but go on.
I mean, I've seen New in Town, but that was with Katie when I was trying to impress her.
Yeah.
We started dating. Guess what? Haven't ever watched one since. It's called The Bait and Switch. Learned that in the Audition facts.
Yeah.
But there's a scene, a lot of stuff he did with camera work I was actually kind of impressed with. Like, there were some long shots where it was like he was walking through like his office, and it went through the wall and continued on. There was that. There's also a time when he was frustrated with his friend, and I was really sad about, because I was like, oh, they make a good friendship. But the camera all of a sudden switched, and it went from being solid, like from left to right, to like action, like kind of shaky, like following weird angles and stuff. And I was like kind of impressed with what I figured what he was doing was to change the camera work up, because the scene is now more intense. They're arguing, and all that. So I was pretty happy with that. But
yeah. And to your point, there were some parts that made me laugh. Like when he's like, am I going to marry the girl who gets the lead in the movie? And his friend's like, no girl who could get the lead would marry you.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is, so the opening scene is like Aomi's, I guess, wife is in the hospital and she dies. And then it cuts to like, several years in the future, and his son is telling him, that he should get back on the dating scene and get remarried. And his answer to that, because it was 1999 and there wasn't Tinder, was to stage an audition for a fake movie with his friend. And that was how they were going to get a bunch of resumes and pictures of girls and then decide which one he wanted, or ones he wanted to date. Which is like the absolute setup for a 90s romantic comedy. I mean, like that's just 100% on point. But you get the feeling pretty early on that this was going to be like a slow burn. Like the music was really kind of subtle, and a lot of the scenes, like there was nothing other than just like the sound of, you know, forks and knives or footsteps. Or it was just really like reflective piano music, almost like Days of Our Lives or something. And I don't know, it absolutely 1000% did not feel like a horror movie at all for a really long time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I don't know if that was like the main purpose of it. I think what I kind of picked up after I realized it was, you know, based on a novel, was it had to be like a weird adaptation of the book. I mean, I haven't read it, so you never know, but it might make a little bit more sense reading it than trying to put it into a movie. It's all I could think of, because adding the music to it and jokes and stuff like that, it's just like, what? Yeah. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? And it's like, I didn't feel like it was even. I felt like it was two movies. It wasn't like. I mean, there was like a slow build into what was going on, like in the middle to end, but like leading up to that, everything just seemed normal. Yeah, for the most part.
And I kind of wondered too. So it was based on a book, and was there a chapter in the book where it starts off like Aomi and his friend are standing on the roof of the building, picking up and throwing golf balls?
Right. Yeah.
Or was that just like creative license by the director? He's like, guys, I got this great idea for a scene.
Got an idea.
What if Aomi has never seen anyone play golf and thinks that it's a ball you throw with your hands? And everyone's like, that'd be hilarious. And it was kind of hilarious, but anyway, the timing was off. Another thing I liked was when his son brought the girl home, and she's like, I'm interested in biology too. I wanted to see his books. And I can honestly say that the line, I have a lot of very interesting educational books at home, has never helped me snag a lady.
Yeah, when she said that, I was like, nerd.
Yeah, for sure.
What a nerd.
Yeah.
I do have to say, though, they always seem real polite.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, up until he was getting like needles in his stomach, I thought, well, it's not that bad.
Yeah, I've dated worse.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned before, there was the scene where things start to change a little bit. It's after Aomi has met Asami and they seem to be into each other, and he has her phone number and he's like debating whether or not he should call after his friend tells him to like cool it a little bit. And it cuts to her sitting at home on the floor of her apartment staring at the phone, and her like neck is bent weird, and there's just kind of the ambient sounds playing in the background. And there really wasn't anything inherently scary about that scene, but because of the way that they filmed it and added the music, it finally felt like it might be a little bit hinting at horror. So I liked the scene just from the perspective of like, it was finally, yes, there's something that's not super straightforward and predictable and, you know, on the track that the movie has set up so far.
Yeah, I think with the scene of her waiting for the phone, it was like, okay, this is definitely creepy. I mean, if you're watching it and you're like, oh, I wonder what's in that big the big bag, and you don't think it's like a body, then you're kind of dumb.
Yeah.
To say the least. But
maybe horror inexperienced.
Yeah. That's a nice way
to
put it. But I mean, I think what I was kind of another reason why I was kind of torn about this is because it's, you know, almost like with Cannibal Holocaust, where it was like, oh, like almost seemed like a kind of like a torture porn kind of thing.
Yes.
And it was like, oh, I mean, I definitely understand it. You know, I understand the idea that they were going with, but it was just like if you're gonna add that, like, have her do something creepy in the like 1/3 into the movie or something, you know, like
right, yeah.
Like the creepiest thing was that scene of her waiting for the phone, but then, you know, like she started to get more and more creepy as time went by, and we're like laying in the bed, like wanting him to, like, she was freaking out about a scar on her thigh. But like she didn't go into detail about how. Well, maybe it did. Did it? Is that when it cut to the scene of how she got it, or did it wait until later?
Wait till later, I think.
So it was just kind of confusing. It was just like, it's like this is also like I put myself in the position of like people in the film, and I couldn't imagine what I would be like if that was happening to me. You know, like how awkward I am anyway. Like I don't know what.
If you were the guy or if you were the girl.
I always feel like I'm the girl. No, if I was the dude, like just like, you know, she's like, no, leave your clothes on, and like I would be like, well, I at least have to take my jacket off because I'm getting hot.
Yes.
I'm gonna set it here.
I've been sweating since we got here.
Trying to make eye contact.
Yeah.
Like we're indoors. I'm wearing a coat.
Mm-hmm.
A little overweight, so I'm trying to not sweat so much.
Yeah, I need to sit down for a minute.
Yeah, and like he was also talking about proposing to her, or like it said about and I didn't know if that was just like translation like mistake, or like if that meant like proposing to date.
Yeah,
I assumed it was, I don't know, but
yeah. So I guess that's kind of like on the border of part 1 and part 2, because basically from the time they get to the hotel and then they have that awkward conversation on, it's real hard to know what's real and what's dream and what is like delusion.
Yeah.
So basically starting at that point, they go away on a trip. She puts out, she's weird about it. Then he wakes up and she's gone. But then we come back to that scene later. So I don't know if something weird happened to him, like if he got drugged or something in that point, or if the future scene was just him like having a dream about it being a different way, or what exactly. But from that point forward, there's some recurring imagery and some recurring themes and ideas that are happening, but the scenes don't necessarily all connect up super well. And then it's really hard to know what's real and what's not, because he's thinking through and making these like connections in his brain, and like people that he's met in the movie are kind of coming in and out of those scenes. And you don't know. I guess the piece of all of this that stood out to me the most is that he had a flashback to like his conversation with her on one of their dates. And I was like, I've already seen this, but the way that she answers his questions is different every time. So before he was like, oh, you know, like, where does your family live? And the first time through, she was like, oh, they live in this other city. I'm not super close, but my dad likes golf, so, you know, he wanted to be out there, and, you know, everything's fine and they're normal. Well, then in this later scene where he's presumably having this, like, dream as he's being poisoned, he asks the same question, but she talks about how they split up and about how her mom, or she went to stay with an aunt, but the aunt was abusive and had thrown her down the stairs, and so she went back to stay with her mom, but her mom's new husband was the creep that hung out in the apartment that she referred to as her dance instructor, but that was also abusive. And so it's like, and then other recurring things in the story made you think that most of what she was saying at that point was true, and that's how it had happened. So I don't know if that was meant to be that, you know, going through it the first time, he was just so, like, sort of infatuated that he just heard what he wanted to hear and wasn't really paying attention to what she was saying, and that she did actually give him the whole background, and it wasn't until, you know, he's passed out on the floor that he's making all these connections to the things he's seen. Or if that's like based on what he's learned, now his brain is filling that in, and he's putting that, like, the way that his brain is revealing to him all these things is just through, like, his delusion of her or something. So anyway, it was weird, and I have no explanation really for what was going on.
Yeah, it was strange from the get-go, because he had this almost like immediate infatuation with her, where, and also it seemed almost like meant to be, like he spilled the coffee on the page and he looked at it and realized it was her, and he was like almost like obsessed. He didn't talk to any of the other girls.
Yeah.
And he was told by his buddy, like, hey, this isn't adding up. Like, the guy who...
yeah, none of the references check out.
Right, none of the references work out. And so, like, it does make sense of, like, the first option of, like, he was kind of... Or, like, the first thing you were saying, where almost like he was kind of, like, love blind and then put it together. That does make sense to me, how it would be like that, I guess. But...
And I think that may play into what some of the larger themes of the movie were, in that he just... he wanted so much for her to be the thing that he wanted her to be that he didn't really take in any of the clues or the other stuff going on. Didn't really care about knowing her as a person. Because of that, was just using her for himself, and then missed the fact that she was, obviously super damaged, and then that led to his downfall. But just in the execution of it, it was super unclear.
Mm-hmm.
And then a question I had for you on that part. So you mentioned before the scene where she like throws up in the bowl and then feeds it to the guy that's in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy in the bag is like missing fingers, and it looks like his tongue has been cut out, and he's like, super messed up, missing both his feet. And so he like crawls forward and eats the bowl of her vomit that she puts on the floor in front of him. Do you think that was supposed to be like what Aomi was going to become if she finished her like torture ritual?
Well,
was that like foreshadowing of what his future was with her?
So I was wondering that myself. It could have been. I was expecting like when she was like doing the torturing that she was going to take off the fingers, and I think that's what. It's kind of weird to say, but like I felt like she would have cut the tongue out maybe because she gave him the shot in the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, probably. Yeah. I don't know where the whole finger came, missing 3 fingers came from, but...
Well, I wondered if, like, had the son not come home and interrupted it, is that what he would have turned into? Was he seeing, like, a glimpse of the future as he was also seeing, like, glimpses of her past?
Yeah.
So...
I mean, that whole trip-out scene that he had was super intense. Is that in Section 2 or Section 3?
2. 3, I'm saying, is like when he wakes up and she's there and torturing him.
Yeah, that whole scene was like super trippy. I mean, like, that's what I was expecting the movie to be, was the trip out scene of like kind of freaking you out. Weird, doesn't necessarily make sense, but still watching it. It didn't really make sense to me, other than like it was kind of cutting back to the scenes of like her talking and answering the questions, because it did seem like the dates kind of ended kind of short.
Yeah.
But I think when it got to that point, I was like, okay, well, like, here we go. Like, obviously he's now on the ground and having some crazy dreams. It's also kind of, I mean, it succeeded in like making you think he was dreaming.
Mm-hmm. Because there was that one scene where he woke up in the bed, and then it was like she had never left.
Right.
And then that happened for a little bit.
Vacation.
Yeah.
Or like on the weekend out. Yeah, I mean, so that was like almost mission accomplished. Like, I could have seen the movie, like, because of not being much action before, I could see the movie ending like kind of on that note and be like, oh, okay, it's one of those movies where it's all a dream. But it did not end that way at all.
Yeah. Yeah, so then I guess part 3 was he wakes back up on the floor in his house, and she's there, but he's paralyzed because of whatever she's given him, and so she rolls him over onto a tarp, and then starts stabbing him with these super sharp little needles all over his body.
Deeper. So what she was saying, deep.
Yeah,
that was creepy, man.
Yeah, it was. And then she's like sawing off his feet and stuff, and it was really strange because she's talking a lot about like, oh yeah, well there's truth in pain, like there's no lying in pain. You just wanted me for what you saw or what you wanted me to be. You didn't really care. You're like everyone else. I only have you, but you have a bunch of people. You'll finally just be mine, and like just kind of generic, kind of crazy stuff. But I do think it goes back to sort of following up with a lot of like the trauma and stuff. So as all this is happening, you realize like what went on with her childhood and all the abuse and everything else, and how that kind of drove her. And it's just weird and uncomfortable. And then the son comes home and she tries to attack him. He's running away. She chases him up the stairs, and then he kicks her down the stairs, and I guess she breaks her neck.
Yeah.
And then she's like kind of laying, looking at him, and he's laying there paralyzed. And then she's talking and just like repeating some of the conversation that she had with him on the first date, almost like a robot. And I was curious if that was meant to be this is just this like rehearsed line that I've used on men multiple times, or if it was I really do feel this way about you. Like, it was a really weird scene in a strange way to end the movie, I thought.
Yeah, because they were like, when she was talking, she was saying something like, I don't know, something to the effect of like, I didn't think I would be. I thought I'd be looking at you like this, but I don't know. It was confusing. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing was kind of. I mean, like, I definitely didn't expect the son to come home.
Yeah.
But also, I was like, kind of expecting someone to like stop it, because like she was doing this in front of an open window and literally threw a foot at a glass window, which looked real. It looked real. Mm-hmm. It looked really real. I think the whole torture thing worked though. Like those needles.
Yeah.
I mean, like pushing him into the stomach and like doing that to his tongue and like in his eye, like that. Like I physically felt like I was hurting watching that, go down.
Yeah, it was physically uncomfortable, for sure.
Yeah, but then the son comes home and she tries to like, I guess, make him go to sleep by spraying like a cologne, like not like a spray bottle, like a Windex bottle, but like something that's kind of poofs right in front of you. And she was running straight forward, spraying it. Yeah. And I was like, shouldn't you be smelling that?
Right.
Anyway, maybe that's why she was
like running through the pepper spray cloud.
Yeah. And also, like, I mean, she did kill the dog.
Yeah.
It was like, that was kind of unnecessary.
Yeah.
But, after she starts talking, like, she didn't want him to love anyone else. Mm-hmm. It was also, for me, it was like also kind of weird. It's like, that's the angle you're going from. Like, you bring up, like, he says, like, don't hurt my son. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you love him also. And it's like, well, it's his son.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sure, but I don't know. It was, overall, I mean, this movie was, it was like 2 hours long, and you got 30 minutes of action, maybe 30 minutes of horror.
Yeah.
And so it was just super, super confusing.
Yeah, it almost reminded me a little bit of Lords of Salem, but without the creepy stuff before the weird ending.
Yeah, without the masturbating priest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up in this one, though.
Yeah, that's actually, wouldn't have surprised me either.
I mean, and I can see how this movie, like, definitely influenced
Kill Bill?
Eli Roth. And Quentin Tarantino, but Eli Roth for sure, because, like, he came out with the whole Hostel movies, and but like he did Cabin Fever, I think, too. So, but anyway, it's hard for me to find a movie scary if you're only scared through a third or like a fourth of it, like a quarter of the film. Like, that's, how is this on, like, if there's so much built into the end and there's not much leading up to it, like with, say like The Conjuring or like Paranormal Activity, you have the things kind of slowly building up, and then you have the big boom. This one, there was very little build up, a little bit of a mystery, and then like it happens, and it's unexpected because very pretty girl, torturing a guy like that, and definitely unexpected, but it was just not, just not for me.
I have 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
Number 1, did you feel sorry for or like empathy for Aomi? The guy.
Thank you.
No.
Yeah, I definitely did. I was like, well, okay, he set up an audition for a fake movie. That's super creepy. Like, okay, but it's not creepy enough to be killed over.
Yeah, no, I'm not asking if he deserved it. I'm just curious if, like, he did anything in the movie that made you feel, like, sympathetic towards him.
Did you?
I have mixed feelings on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, I mean, he
was like a good dad.
He seemed kind of suave. Was he, though?
He kept it. He kept it to. I wish I had a dad like him, like had money, and just let me do whatever I wanted. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but he's just like, I don't know. It seemed very like uninvolved in the son's life, and was just kind of like,
he seemed really independent. He's like, I'm gonna go be a nerd with my other nerds.
His son was in high school and sitting around reading about dinosaurs all day. I mean,
living the dream.
Anyway, I'm just saying that's weird parenting. He just
is.
seemed very much like in his own thing, and maybe that's because we only saw him like when he had decided to re-enter the dating world and try to get his groove back.
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know. And then
they also had it together for someone like who was walking to see his mom and she died.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that would mess you up pretty bad.
True.
And
yeah.
like he had it together really well, so I was like, I bet the dad was a good dad.
Fair enough. Yeah, he didn't seem super traumatized by that, so maybe there was some good parenting in between. But yeah, I don't know. He just never did anything that made him seem like virtuous or kind or like anything else. It was basically just like, I want a woman. And so I'm going to lie to a bunch of them. And then I'm going to pick the one that I'm most turned on by. And then I'm going to pay money to try and make her like me. Like, I don't know.
That's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
But like, it just, I don't know. The whole thing about it is you didn't really ever have, like, you weren't ever like cheering for him to accomplish anything other than at the very end. Because even like when she left, like after the hotel she left, you're like, well, yeah, she got weirded out, dude. And she's weird. So like, let that go.
See, I actually kind of thought the opposite. I thought like she was strange in this situation of like, like, all of a sudden she was sitting on the bed like when they're at the hotel,
yeah,
and like she just looks over and like it's just like obviously not. I don't know. I thought she was strange, but I also felt like the dad felt like he was having to do that because his son was planning on moving out. Like I think his son was like planning on leaving, and like he didn't want the dad to be alone, and so he felt obligated. I don't understand why people think being alone's bad though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
I really am. And so like that's where I have the trouble. But I don't know, I didn't think like he did anything. Like I thought like she was weird, he was weird, and the son was like just like a nerd.
All right.
Does that mean that I shouldn't say it? If you're into dinosaurs, it doesn't make you a nerd, but like he was a nerd.
Yeah.
He's like, why are you hurrying up and eating? He's like, well, there's a new, I don't know, dinosaur found or something. And it's like, dang. If you want to learn, you're a nerd.
It takes all types. So, question number 2 for you.
Yeah.
If they remade this movie with the same general premise, except he met her on Tinder instead of through an audition, do you think it would have been a better movie, and do you think it would have been scarier and a lot more like haunting for the modern age?
So I'm actually glad that you said that, because I was gonna say this. I don't necessarily feel like there's a huge difference between like a Tinder and what he did.
Yes.
Like it's still, there's still the weird. I'm not a fan of Tinder. I don't know. But I think maybe, I don't know.
Since you got married, it's just more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, for real. No. But I think it's kind of the same concept. It's like, okay, if that's what you use to meet people, cool. That's probably, how it is. And maybe that's what he felt like he had to rely on back then. But I was like, like, it's not like he was a bad looking dude. He had money. Like I felt like he could date someone. But anyway, I think it would probably be the same for me. And it probably will be remade into a movie, and that's going to be the concept of it.
Yeah. And what I was going for there was just like, I feel like it would be really easy in 2019 to watch this and be like, oh, those terrible pigs, they're just doing this audition and preying on young girls and, you know, putting forth this false premise to try and blah, blah, blah. And I'm so glad the tables got turned on them. And really, it's like, I feel like a lot of people right now are doing that basically every day, and maybe to a different extent, not with the intention of marriage after, but I don't know. It's interesting just sort of how normal that seems now. And that just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to put up, a paragraph of text and 3 pictures, and now I'm going to go meet people. Like, I don't know.
I mean, like Tinder, I feel like is the hookup app. At least it was like, that's what, when it first came out, like that's what I think everyone talked about. So with that, it's like, okay, like this dude's just wanting to hook up. He would get on Tinder.
Yeah.
You want to find a real love, you get on farmersonly.com.
I was going to say Match.com. Because their algorithms have like 30 plus compatibility points that I don't even remember what those commercials were, but they were annoying.
So I think this movie could be feminist or it could be misogynist.
Christian
It could
Mingle.
go either way. You know what I mean?
Plenty of fish.
Cowboysonly.com. For Dallas Cowboy fans, I'm told.
You're told.
I'm an admin on the site.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it just missed its mark. There's no way. I mean, I think this is definitely on the list higher than some of the bitch-ass movies we watched on this list.
Under the Skin.
Every week. But also, here's the other beef that I've been holding on to this. This movie, what was it, like 21 on the list of scariest movies of all time? 28 days later was 30th.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's like, what are you talking? And then come on, son.
Yeah, like everything, like 10 movies down from this, it was bad.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing, but
yeah.
I'm glad we watched it. We would have ended up watching this because of me. I'm glad that we watched this because of the list.
Yeah, we can offload the blame.
Yeah.
But just
because I mean, like, I remember. I mean, if you go back to our earlier podcast, I remember like seeing this, thinking like, "Oh, this seems interesting." Thinking like,
yeah. Well, we're going long, so real quick, one last thing. I went and saw the movie Parasite with Leo earlier this week, and the reason I bring it up is because there were a lot of things about this movie that I felt like were a little bit similar. And that movie is a Korean film, whereas this one was Japanese, but it was all subtitled. It was some of the same, I guess, kind of tone for some of it, just kind of like the dark and moody. But I thought that Parasite was really, really good. And it was a little bit too long, especially towards the end. But overall, it was an extremely well-made movie with a very, very interesting story. And so if people get a chance... Because I feel like if you've listened this far in this episode, like you're okay with watching a non-US movie with subtitles that doesn't follow a lot of like the normal Hollywood conventions. Parasite is a movie worth going to see.
well, I got a movie recommendation as well.
And sorry, one more thing. I wouldn't necessarily call it horror. I would just call it a good movie, kind of like Nightcrawler.
Here's my real quick. It's called Extreme Job. It's a Korean film. It's about police officers who buy a chicken, like KFC type store, to catch some bad guys.
I'm in. What's it called again?
Extreme Job.
All right. Next week on the Horrific Podcast,
Korean
Extreme Job.
comedies.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
You should see my wife.
I'll edit that out. So,
Nah.
there's
I want you to cut it and send it to her.